segment brought to you by Richard Carr Motors, Buick GMC Cadillac. People you can count on. We're now joined by Travis Roeder. He covers Baylor football, college football, Sic'Em365.com, and also here on 365 Sports. Travis, my goodness, I can't imagine. After a 6-7 season, so many questions. People have left. People have arrived. Not just recruits, but transfers. Off the top of your head, it's so early to say, what do you expect? Because that's boring. But what one or two storylines have, at least for right now or on Monday, your most attention?
I mean, I think obviously, all right, thanks for having me on again, guys. But obviously the quarterback battle is going to be at the forefront of everyone's mind. It's going to be a bit anticlimactic this spring, I imagine, just because, I really cannot imagine a scenario in which Baylor is going to name a starting quarterback after this spring. They need the competition to go into the fall. I expect those guys to be close. And B, the new transfer kid, Sawyer Robertson, coming in from Mississippi State, played at Lubbock Coronado. He was in that Mike Leach system. And so he was playing in an air raid system where I don't think he ever touched the center's behind before. So he's going to have to learn how to play under center and do all that fun stuff that is required in the Baylor Jeff Grimes offense. So I think he's going to need a spring to acclimate. So I think that the quarterback competition is at the forefront. And I think the other really kind of just undercurrent, underlying theme of this spring is going to be the fact that last year they only took a few transfers. Aranda has spoken about how he really bet on some of the older guys who had never produced before on the team. And he has kind of acknowledged that was a mistake. And so this year, I think you really saw a different deal where I don't know the total number of transfers, but it's got to be right around 10 guys, which is, basically 10% of your roster. And I think what you're going to see is just the fact that they took so many guys. So how do all those new transfers come in? A lot of them have experience. They're going to come in and kind of elevate the competition level from the get-go. So I think that's going to be really interesting to watch.
Travis, among those transfers are a couple offensive linemen, the Barrington brothers,
right,
and a bunch of guys who, barely even really know each other's first names as far as telling them what to do on the O-line. That was a strength of this team. Now it is a huge question mark. How quickly do you think that comes together?
Well, I mean, I don't think it's going to come together quickly in the spring. That's very much going to be another position where it's probably going to be a little bit anticlimactic. Of course, I'm going to be curious to see what positions guys are primarily spending their time at. But this is not going to be a situation, I think, where anybody comes in and just plays one position, gets 95% of the reps with the ones, and immediately wins a job. I think this is very much going to be a deal where everyone's learning 2-3 positions, a lot of rotation, a lot of competition, figuring out where guys end up. And then by the time we get to game one in the fall, that's when you're going to see things solidify. But, I will say, anytime you lose 5 offensive line starters, that's a big deal. But as long as Eric Mateos is around, it's just a unit where Baylor is never going to have a bad unit. With him coaching the O-line, it's just O-line especially is just really a position that's so much about technique and effort. And Baylor certainly has some talent to work with. So, yeah, I expect some hiccups, and I think, obviously it'll take them some time to gel. But when you've got one of the top offensive lineman coaches in America leading things for you, I think that unit is going to be more than fine this year.
What will be the strength of the offense this year? Because it sure seems like they have a lot of question marks at the moment, from O-line to who's playing quarterback. I know they've reloaded the receiver room, but that's quite a bit of question marks outside of Monterey Baldwin. I guess Hal Presley could step up, but where are you kind of looking as far as the sure thing, the strength going into spring?
That's a great question, Craig, because, as I'm racking my brain as you just asked me that, because I expect the offense to be quite good this year. Even though they are replacing so many pieces, and that's for a variety of reasons. But, a big one is that I really like the kid they took from Oklahoma State, the transfer, Dominic Richardson. And even though he's going to be playing behind a brand new offensive line, as I kind of just talked about, I expect that unit to be good under Mateos' tutelage there. And Richardson is a guy that, I was really high on Tay McWilliams and Squirrel Williams last year. Tay got knocked out early in the year with concussion. Squirrel dealt with a scary knee injury in fall camp, and I thought he just never really looked the same after that injury. Dominic is much more like an Abram Smith, where he's a big kid. He's about 6 foot, 215, runs behind his pads, and he played behind a terrible offensive line at Oklahoma State, but he was still able to churn out yards. You go back and watch that Oklahoma State win at Baylor this past year. A lot of it was because they were handing the ball off into the teeth of the Baylor defense, and Dominic Richardson was, hitting a defensive lineman at the line of scrimmage, but still managing to kind of churn through and get 2 or 3 yards. And that's what Oklahoma State did. They just kind of ground Baylor down. So long story short there, even though they're replacing so many offensive linemen, I do think just with the time they've had with this offense and how to build the wide zone, playing under Eric Mateos and Jeff Grimes, I think the running game is going to be a real strength because behind Dom Richardson, they have some good talent as well.
Travis Roeder covers Baylor football with us on 365 Sports. What is Dave Aranda he has the new staff, obviously with the new defensive coordinator and what he brings to the table, which seems to be maybe a little bit of infusion of youth and perhaps energy. Running backs coach and Stewart, he comes in as well. What do you expect from Christian Robinson? Do you see anything new with what they bring to the table?
Yeah, I mean, I think, Sic'Em 365 did this wonderful NIL breakfast thing with Aranda and Grimes and Powledge. And there was a lot of insight given there, and that video is up on Sic'Em 365 if anybody wants to watch the full interview. But, it's kind of remarkable, Smokey, and y'all know Aranda is so forthright when you ask him anything, and he's so open about his mistakes and what he's wanting to improve upon. And basically every time he's been asked about the struggles of the defense and firing Ron Roberts and hiring a new defensive coordinator, Matthew Powledge, he's really been consistent about one thing, and that's relationships with players, positivity, energy. It's almost like he was trying to hire Scott Drew basically to be his defensive coordinator. And I think that really is something to watch because, in that 6 and 7 season last year, it's always dangerous as a media member, somebody outside of the team, to try and psychoanalyze the team. But I think pretty much any fan I talk to can kind of tell that something just wasn't right in the water on that side of the ball last year. And listening to Aranda talk, I think he would tell you the same. And that doesn't necessarily mean that, Ron is a bad defensive coordinator or anything like that, but just something wasn't right on that side of the ball last year. So I'm really looking forward to getting some energy and some vitality kind of re-injected into that side of the ball. And, Powledge is a young coach. He's really well known for being able to relate to kids well. And that doesn't just mean necessarily, know what kind of music they're listening to or something like that. But just coaches have to be able to meet with these guys on a face-to-face level and understand them. And from all reports, he's really great at doing that. And he's a great coach to boot.
Yeah, Travis, sometimes it's just time, though, right? It's just not, people, you need to go somewhere else. It's not an indictment on anything. It's just, except for the fact that, professionally, it's just time for a new event in your life.
Yeah, I mean, Ron is a hell of a ball coach. I got to speak with him on a couple different occasions, and I love speaking with him. The guy, he has a bunch of old school kind of coaching clinics up that you can find on YouTube and stuff like that, and you can just tell, man, he is a ball coach. He knows ball. He is old school. And again, that's what's so interesting about building a college football staff is there's no one formula that works at every spot. And every staff kind of needs the same mix of different things. So you're going to need some guys who are good at recruiting. You're going to need some guys who are good at relating to kids. You're going to need some guys who are really good X's and O's. And so you're going to find that at different spots. And so I think, again, kind of psychoanalyzing from afar here, I think one thing that we've learned is that, Dave Aranda is, in his own way, really good at relationships with players and things like that, but perhaps needed on the defensive side of the ball, Dave already has kind of the X's and O's and the ball coach aspect of it going. So maybe he needed somebody more like Powledge, who's got a little bit more, I don't know if you want to call it energy or what have you. Again, all these kind of words have so many stereotypes associated with them. But, I think just finding the right mix was certainly a big part of bringing Powledge in. And again, like you said, Paul, it doesn't necessarily mean Ron is a bad coach. He might do great at Auburn, and I wouldn't be surprised if he did because it's just a totally different scenario there. So I think this was the right move for Baylor, though.
with the new approach, new defensive coordinator, and now the absence of Siaki Ika, how does that change what you think that they do up front?
Yeah, I mean, so this is where, I won't get too technical over the radio, but essentially when you have Siaki Ika, he's 6'4", 300 and, however many pounds, I'm not sure what he weighed at the combine. Hopefully it was less than 380 or so, but I mean, he's a big dude. But he was really quick and he was a good pass rusher too. So he was really kind of that space alien type of interior defensive lineman where you can play him as a plug and he wouldn't get blown off the ball by double teams, but he could also do fun and creative stuff by getting in the backfield. So those kind of guys don't grow on trees. There's probably just a few of them that are available every offseason in college football. Baylor doesn't have one on the roster this year. They have good players. They just don't have an Apu Ika. And so what that means is that instead of kind of building the defense from the middle out in the sense of you could stick Apu in the middle there, have him command double teams, make plays in the backfield, I think you're going to see a little bit more of a return to how Dave Aranda really made his hay when he was at Wisconsin, which is really kind of being a lot more versatile and creative with how you use those defenders up front. Because, like I said, when you don't have an Apu Ika, you got to find different ways to get it done. And for Aranda, that means having a lot of guys who are a lot more versatile and can do different things as opposed to just kind of controlling the space in front of them.
All right, let's obviously teams who have at least an arrow up after last season: Texas Tech, Texas, TCU, Kansas State, and I think you have to include Kansas in that mix because of what they did.
Include Kansas.
And then you have Iowa State, West Virginia, Oklahoma State is in such transition, but I still think Gundy, that's who he is. He's good. So, and then Oklahoma, year 2 under Venables, you would think they would get better. Then you have the bonuses of Houston, Brigham Young, Cincinnati, UCF. Is Baylor a contender for the upper half or lower half of the new Big 12 next season?
I mean, I think they have the talent to be in the upper half, no doubt. And so I think this is a critical year for Aranda. I think it's always kind of an uncomfortable topic when you start talking about, what coaches need to do, how many wins they need to get. But I think, it's, when I've kind of just put my feelers out there to just various family members and friends and everybody else, when I talk about like, hey, how many games do y'all think Baylor needs to win for you this year to kind of feel good about things? And really the lowest number I've heard is 7, and most people are talking more like 8 wins. And so obviously a team isn't made by fan expectations, but I think it'd be foolish to not consider that fan expectations play a significant part in kind of the feeling and trajectory of a program. And, we all know how disappointing 6 and 7 felt this past year. And it kind of gave us a glimpse into what a 6 and 7 team looks like. It's a team with talent that just can't really ever put it together. And so I think really that's what I'm looking for this next season is that talent is still there. They've added some great pieces in the transfer portal. Aranda has made some really important changes on the coaching staff. They don't want to be a 500 ball club again, and they don't want to be, flirting with 500 again. And so if you're getting up there towards 8, 9 wins, that's definitely a top half of the Big 12 team. So that's my expectation, and I think that really should be the expectation of the team and the fans.
And you wonder if the special teams is better, too, which is always something that separates a 6-win team to be an 8 or 9 or vice versa if it doesn't go well. Thanks for your time, Travis. Appreciate you jumping on with us. We'll have you on again as the spring drills begin for Baylor next week, the spring game late in April. When we come back,